It's round 12, the penultimate round of the Tata Steel Masters, and I've got an absolutely cracking game to show you here. Jorden Van Foreest against Anish Giri. Of course, Giri just a half a point behind the leader, Abdusattorov. So he was looking for a sharp game, and I can tell you, he got it here. Here we go. Starts out as a pretty orthodox Queen's Pawn opening. Van Foreest playing the exchange variation, so it could go into a normal Queen's Gambit with Bishop e7. But Giri goes back into a Ragozin. And here Bishop g5 is a standard move, but Bishop f4, this is quite trendy. Giri hits the outpost with a knight and attacks the knight on c3, which Van Foreest defends. Now knight c6 is already quite a sharp position. Why does black play knight c6? Well, it's about covering the e5 square and also looking at d4, so that now black wants to chase down that bishop. And you notice the knight covers e5. And here knight d2 is already, well, it's been played quite a few times, but really interesting positions. But instead of that, Van Foreest plays a new move, never been seen before. Pawn to h4. I mean, this is so weird. Is that a computer move? Is this what the latest version of Stockfish suggests? Well, if you look at this with a computer, now every computer shows something a little bit different, but this comes at 4th or 5th best according to computers. So what's Van Foreest doing playing this move? Well, for a start, it prevents g5, but it also brings Giri out of his known lines. He's exceptionally good at theory. He's so well prepared. So you could, but when you play h4, of course, Van Foreest will have checked this with computers. But he also knows it's not that bad either. Bishop f5 looks normal. Bishop on a good square supporting the knight. e3. And white is ready just to play bishop d3. But here, Giri takes the bait. He thought for 5.5 minutes and took on c3 and played bishop a3. Because the rook is trapped. If it goes in the corner, then bishop b2. So what is Van Foreest doing? Well, this is the clever bit of prep. Rook b1, of course, to justify exchanging on c3, which does improve white's structure. Then, whoops, black has to take that rook. So now Giri is the exchange up. So this is where Van Foreest's research comes in. This is really deep research. Computers don't give white the advantage here, but what they do show is that this exchange sacrifice is playable, and it puts pressure on black straight away. The move that machines favour here is knight e7. Not an obvious move because it allows white to take that pawn. But instead Giri plays the obvious move, rook b8, to cover this pawn. And if bishop d3, then this is an important move. Bishop d6. Exchanging bishops, forcing an exchange of bishops, and that leaves black fairly comfortably placed. And that's why this next move, Van Foreest, is clever. Queen b3, and he played it very quickly, obviously prepared. Pushing the bishop back. If it goes back to d6, that pawn can be taken. That's the difference. And if bishop e7, then white develops. And you can see with these two beautiful bishops, in fact, all white's pieces come into play here. Well, g6, then obviously h5. And if h6, then knight g5. Again, the h-pawn comes good. You know, this is has been seen a million times before. and the rook comes into play. So a very clever idea, and possibly overlooked by Giri, who thought for about 12 minutes here, or let's say underestimated. He decided not to put the bishop back here, but instead he played a principal move, bishop d6 anyway, exchanging off that bishop, giving a pawn, but, well, worth it to exchange some pieces. Now, of course, white doesn't want to exchange queens, a check. Queen e7 and queen takes bishop. And now queen a3. I mean, at first glance, you kind of think, what is white doing? White's the exchange down. The king is still in the middle. Black's queen looks so menacing. I mean, it just looks fantastic for black. Of course, it's not so clear. First of all, the queen comes back. Check. The knight blocks. And the queen comes back to c2. White is ready to play bishop d3. You have a pawn for the exchange, nice centre and nice pieces. Knight d5 from Giri. Now, if white wants to repeat the position, you can play queen e4 check, and that forces the knight back. But Van Foreest was playing his moves very quickly at this point, and he played c4, so he's playing for a win. And Giri thought now for 28 minutes. I found his choice quite surprising here. I would have expected queen c3 check as the safest choice, exchanging queens. So, for example, takes here and forces an exchange, knight f6. Now, white has a certain amount of compensation here. You have a bishop and a pawn for a rook and a very, very nice centre. But I would have thought that black would be comfortable in this position. You know, perhaps c5, just making sure that one doesn't move. But instead, Giri went for knight c3, which is a brave move because it does give white the chance to attack. c5, excellent move, giving the bishop a square here. b6, Giri wants to open lines. Bishop c4. So things are really hotting up now. Pawn takes pawn, and white's king escapes just in time. Now this king has to decide what to do. I mean, it really can't stay in the middle. There's all kinds of interesting things happening. You know, knight g5, for example. So castle's kingside. So white still the exchange down. I mean, it's hard to imagine that white has enough compensation here, but it's absolutely fascinating. White certainly is doing okay here, and this is a clever move. h5, preventing black from playing g6 because, well, okay, let me just show this. You can't block the diagonal because, of course, the queen takes, pin and win. Let's come back. So that's why h5 was played, and then white threatens knight g5 with a devastating attack on this diagonal. And yeah, if h6, which would seem okay to prevent knight g5, then I think already, yeah, queen f5 followed by bishop d3 could be pretty nasty, or perhaps knight e5 there. Notice how in these variations the queen is way across the other side of the board. Yes, it's a queen in Siberia. Here, computer likes rook b6 to defend along the sixth rank or third rank, depending on how you're looking at it. But white still has excellent compensation here after this, and g4, interestingly. Queen b4 by Giri, and this is a mistake. Now, proving this is a mistake is another matter. Knight g5. That's a good start. Threatening mate. Therefore, g6. Now white doesn't have time to take here because that bishop is attacked. So queen d3, white just has to slow down for a moment to defend the bishop. And now white is threatening to take here. Rook b6 defends the pawn on g6. Now, I'm going to hand this over to you. White to play and win. The computer gets very excited at this moment, thinking that white is winning. I mean, when I say winning, I can't remember the exact digits, but seriously winning. But Van Foreest played a good move here, but not the absolute best move. So I'll have a slurp of tea with my beautiful Octopus Knight mug. You have a think. White to play and win. Cheers. The best move here is Rook c1. And that knight is just driven to a really poor square. So for example, knight here. And this next move is very subtle. Queen e4. Now that is a very difficult follow-up. You might have spotted Rook c1. Did you find Queen e4 as well? This exploits the fact that the queen is just miles away. And white is threatening to crash in on this square. For example, pawn takes pawn. Well, that attempts to connect the queen. Knight takes. Now, if that's captured, watch what happens with the rook. The rook comes good on the c-file, and, well, white checkmates the lone king very quickly. And let's try Rook f6. But white has too many pieces in play here. And knight e4. Well, the pin is just too much. And at some point, that knight is going to be loose on a4 as well. Okay, let's try something else. So after Rook c1, instead of knight here, what about pawn takes pawn? So that tries to connect here. Queen takes. The knight is threatened. It's also interesting things like h6 is in the air as well, and it won't be possible to block the diagonal. Okay, so knight moves, knight a4. White exchanges on g6. And again, you take, and it's the same as before. The rook crashes in and the king is not going to escape the queen and rook here. But that is not easy to see. Rook c1. I think the really difficult move here is queen e4. It's such a cool move. You know, white is just creeping towards the king and it works. Instead, Van Foreest played d takes c5. It's also a good move. Not quite as good. If that's taken, then white takes on f7 and queen takes c3. And this one is going, and this is winning for white. So after d takes c5, rook c6. I mean, it feels like, I mean, black is hanging by a thread in this position. This is a good move. Let's just have a quick look at this. I mean, it's very complex. And now white picks up the rook on f7 by deflecting the king. But this is not over. Absolutely not. Okay, careful. Queen h4 mate isn't possible because of the queen defends, but queen c5. This is better for white, but it's not yet winning. Still some way to go there, but that's a possibility. But Van Foreest took on g6. I suspect he wanted more. Rook takes g6, so the rook connects with the king side. That's actually necessary. And things aren't so clear now. The computer thinks bringing the knight back is the best move, but it's getting messy now. f4 played. supporting the knight. Now, Giri played rook g7, defending f7. I mean, it's a pretty weird move. In fact, I mean, have a look at this position. If you were black, what would you do here? Black to play. And I wouldn't say black's best move is at all obvious in this position. But the computer likes c6. Absolutely not obvious. And the point is that if the rook attacks the knight, then it actually comes back to d5 and puts up some kind of defense. But Giri played rook g7, and here again the computer gets extremely excited for white. Van Foreest played rook c1. As we'll see, it's a good move, but not the best move. Okay, what is white's best move here? And this is fantastic. And this has echoes of Kasparov-Karpov, a couple of famous games from their World Championship matches. That's a massive clue for you. Maybe. Okay, how does white win? Watch this. Knight takes f7. Has to be captured. Now, this is the star move. And this has echoes of a couple of famous wins by Kasparov in the Spanish. King h2. White takes a timeout to put the king to a safer square. This is wonderful. It's a computer suggestion, of course. But as I said, it has echoes of Kasparov. Okay, what's the big idea? All right, let me show you one particular variation. For example, okay, white's a rook down, but black is really tied up here, and the pieces are so badly coordinated. Right, what happens if black plays king h8 to get out of the pin? Then white takes. Rook c1, attacking the knight. It's very short of squares. Knight e4, and now rook c4. Notice, with the king on h2, there is no check on e1. So white will pick up the knight and wins easily. There you go. There had to be a point. Oh, actually, yeah, let me just show that's... Yeah, it's not even a draw by perpetual. After that, let me just show that. I'm thinking out loud, of course, because of that. Or you could check. Checking is also good. And then, in fact, there's no check on h4. Yeah, that's the cleanest kill, of course. Okay, back we go. King h2. What else can black try? Okay, let's try that move c6 in order to block here. Then rook f3. Just swinging up the board. Knight d5. And this is very nice. Queen d4. What a cool move. With the idea rook g3 check and the king is caught. Notice, again, there's no annoying queen e1 check here. Rook g7. Oh, that doesn't work because you take the queen. This is stunning. Let's just see that again. Knight takes, rook takes, king h2. Absolutely brilliant. I think I've recorded those Kasparov-Karpov games on the channel, actually. I'll try and find the links for you if you want to see that move again. Okay, rook g7 played. Van Foreest played rook c1, attacking the knight, which came to a4. I mean, it still looks really unpleasant for black with these forces at either end of the board. But incredibly, black seems to be able to defend. Knight e4 comes back. It's basically, this is an attempt to trap the knight because the c-pawn is covered. There are how Giri escapes from this with black is pretty extraordinary, I have to say, because black is absolutely on the edge in this position. He plays knight b2, attacking the queen. Queen b3. I'm sure he was relieved to be able to exchange the queens. King h8. So avoids a check here, but also prepares f5. That's very important. Rook b1 attacks the knight. Knight d3. Bishop c2. Is the knight trapped? No. because black has f5. And if the knight moves, then knight takes c5. So Van Foreest had to exchange off into this endgame. Right, what's the score? The score is, at the moment, it's bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. But that's a problem, because the e3 pawn is vulnerable. Rook defends the bishop. Now rook d8, and suddenly black is activating. The king is actually safe. It's going to come to g7, and this rook activates, and there's a few loose points in white's position. Van Foreest plays in the best way here. I mean, white could be worse here if you get it wrong. At the moment, white is badly tied up, and he plays excellently. He's not worried about the pawn count. He is basically moving his king up to protect his greatest asset, which is these centre pawns. In combination with a rook and bishop, they can still be potent. Let's have a look. Rook d2 check, and then rook takes a2, and now g4. So this pawn front starts to advance, and white is ahead, for example, of this a pawn. So g5 could be very nasty. Beautiful pawn chain, and the king can come up behind it. So therefore h6 just gives black a little bit of room. Pawns advance again. King f4. So if there's a check, then the bishop can block. Rook a3. So it's a bishop and pawn against a rook. So that's just keeping an eye on this pawn so the bishop can't move. King f6. So Giri has managed to get a decent blockade on the dark squares. However, white can try to push forward and also upset the king like this. Rook a2, so that Giri keeping active. He wants to hassle the king. And if, well, Van Foreest could play rook d8 here. And I think this would probably end in a draw like this, and so on. But he keeps playing for the win. This is very impressive. I mean, it is a very sharp position still. And once again, I think the position could easily end in a draw after king e3, rook g2, and so on. And, you know, you wouldn't have chided Van Foreest for, you know, just allowing this repetition and heading for a draw. But instead, he kept playing for a win. This took real guts. Because this can turn easily. I mean, you know, once black starts blockading here. But he had it under control. And again, king e3 would repeat the position. But no, he wants more. This is absolutely fantastic stuff. c6, so, you know, he's perhaps looking to play rook d7. Well, not in this position, but, you know, if the rook moves away. a5, king e3, and again they're repeating, and here we go, bishop e2. So this is where rook d7 becomes a theme in the position, with this rook just for the moment shut out of the position. King f6, bishop f3, rook c2 behind that pawn, important. King f4, but you know, if white can get in e5, this is interesting. Rook takes c6, not on, of course. e5 check wins the rook. So a4. Suddenly this one looks like it's heading for the winning post. Rook g8. a3. Rook check. What is this rook up to? Not a lot. It has to stay behind that pawn. a2. Aha, this is what it's about. He's managed to advance this e-pawn. So he's lifted the blockade and these pawns roll forward. And now, actually, black has to be incredibly careful. You can see how this one is rolling, possibly supported by the bishop. And, you know, there are threats here. Giri played the only move, rook e8. Obviously, if that's taken, black mates a queen. So the rook had to come back. King f8. e6. I mean, this looks really scary. Yeah, the problem is actually white can't advance too far because this rook can never take here. Rook f2, and that prevents the king coming forward as well. So actually, a kind of standoff has been reached. King e3, rook b2, king d4, king g7. I mean, it's also a very interesting move. So the king comes up before this one can come in here. Rook check. But actually the king is much safer here. The rook has to come back, of course. Rook d8 check. Rook f2. Yeah, it's a slight problem for that bishop that it hasn't really got an anchor here. Black is always able to hassle that one. Bishop c2. Okay, that breaks connection. However, rook d6 and black is able to scoop up that pawn. You can see how white can't quite hold everything together here. It is very close indeed. Rook takes a2, rook takes c6 check, rook h2. You can see it's just a little bit loose. e7, the rook rushes back, but this one is under control. You can see that the pieces simply don't connect with that rook. Rook a6. So, you know, with a kind of threat here, and check and rook and f6. And here Giri forced to draw. Rook takes c2, queen, rook d2 check. And there is no escape. Perpetual check. Of course, the king could go this way. But that would be unfortunate. And suddenly, there you go, black wins. So just a draw. Just a draw, I say. Wow, what a game. I mean, absolutely fantastic. I mean, really, both players deserve enormous credit. The standard of play was incredibly high. I saw a lot of people online saying, oh, Van Foreest missed a win. These wins were so difficult to find, as you know, we've seen. And all the way through, as I said, I think the standard was incredibly high. But what an interesting opening with h4. And that really is a tale of modern preparation in tournament play, where you don't always pick the computer's top move because you know your opponents are probably going to have analysed that, but you pick something that's pretty decent and then go into that in real depth. Right, let's have a look at the scores. Scores on the doors. Going into the final round, Nodibek Abdusatorov has 8. Giri has 7.5. Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen have 7. There were lots of draws at the top today. Incredible fights. Carlsen fought so hard against Pragnananda. But it means tomorrow, well, we've got a great fight. Abdusatorov has white against Van Foreest. Giri has white against Rapport. So has black against Pragnananda. Carlsen has black against Erogaisti. What do I think is going to happen? I reckon Abdusatorov is going to play super solid against Van Foreest and make a draw. I think Giri is going to have a fantastic scrap against Rapport and play to win. We could be heading for a tie-break. That's my prediction. We'll see what happens. I'll report back on the final round of the Tata Steel Masters. See you later.